not far off. So nearly a century of tradition there. We're now going to turn to the final session before lunch, which is a session where we welcome Alan Hardman and welcome Meilir Jones to the stage. I don't know where they're going to sit down. Alan and Meilir, are you? I'm standing there. And is Alan here? Oh, yes, you are. Sorry, a slight panic there. And we have had reference to Meilir already, haven't we? But you know what? I think as one of the external examiners, and Lana being an internal examiner for the work that Meilir did for his doctorate, we will hear more about the doctorate now. I just think we should congratulate Meilir on achieving his doctorate. So congratulations. And let's invite Dr. Meilir Jones and Dr. Alan Hardman to the stage. Yes, so just before handing over to Meilir, just some words, again, the Coleg Cymraeg. So Meilir, he's the second student we've supported through a doctorate. The first was Dr. Hywel Iorwerth, who did his research around identity and sport. Meilir is here to present what he has just finished. And Olivia is here in the audience as well, having started, nearly finished the first year of her doctorate looking at sport and language and sport, vintage sports tourism. And the link we look at all the time is use and impact of the language linked to sport. So there's a common thread through all the research. But today, Meilir is going to contribute. What we're going to do is, Meilir is going to present for 10 minutes, and then I will go around with the mic if you have any questions. So hopefully, I have questions as backup in case, but it would be better for better questions to come from you. But hopefully there will be lots of questions. So thank you, Meilir. Thanks very much. I think the biggest challenge is to present a PhD piece of work in 10 minutes, but I'll try my best. Thanks to Ellen, first of all, for the congratulations, and thanks for passing the PhD for me. I wouldn't have been here if I'd failed. Ellen told me yesterday, why haven't you put Dr. Meilir Jones on your slide? I sometimes forget that I am Dr. Meilir Jones, so next time I will. So yes, I'm going to look at the relationship between social media, football and the Welsh language. So I know there are many people already this morning who've touched on lots of those elements on social media, how they work. Craig talked about it in Europe, and we've also heard about it in Wales. But I hope to give my experience of completing the PhD and develop some of those ideas we've already talked about this morning. So yes, I want to start with some kind of inspiration in terms of how I started this project. About 5 years ago, Alan and Carolyn Jones presented the project to me. They wanted someone to look at this relationship, since we felt that no one really had looked at the three elements together before. And they gave me quite a blank canvas, to be honest. But social media is quite a wide wide-ranging area. There was no instruction in terms of which bodies to look at, but I remember this tweet by Rabbi Matondo, and it's quite timely that he's back in the Welsh squad for these games. And Rabbi at the time was a young man, having been brought up in Cardiff, but he came from a non-Welsh speaking family, and he started tweeting quite often in Welsh and had a really positive response to doing so. And I just thought it was really interesting that this tweet was in Welsh and he received 2.2 thousand likes, and he tweeted the exact same thing in English and only got 189 likes. And as you can see as well from the responses, there have been 30 responses to the Welsh one and only 1 to the English one. So immediately there I thought, what's happening here? Why has that happened? So that gave me some kind of inspiration that it's possible to use Twitter to look more broadly at the area and to understand what's going on here. So this is evidence, firm evidence in itself, quantitative evidence that something's happening here. But I decided that I wanted to go down the route of looking at qualitative data and really understand why what this link was and why there was so much potential to the link between football, social media and the Welsh language. So the aims and objectives of the project are there on screen. I won't read through all of those, I'll leave them on screen for a brief moment, but the main aim of the project was to discover the potential of sports social media in trying to get more people to speak Welsh. So going back to that tweet, I wanted to understand whether tweets in relation to sport, whether footballers or from sporting organisations, or even as we've talked about this morning, some owners who are using the Welsh language, whether those tweets had the potential to promote more people to speak Welsh. Now, the two first objectives, they're a little bit of a literary review. So I looked into the social theories, social linguistics, language sociology, just to set the background of the project. And then in the second chapter, to understand the relationship between the language, our identity as Welsh people, and the role that sport can play in emphasizing our identity. But what I want to talk about more today is three last objectives, and three being the main focus of my research. And the three objectives make perform a slightly completely different role. First one, looking at Welsh speakers. So we're talking about the public, people at grassroots, people who are at the bottom when it comes to setting policies. The second is an evaluative analysis of organisations in Wales, whether they use Welsh well, maybe they don't use Welsh as well, something similar to what Craig talked about in that assessment of how they use the Welsh language. And then the final objective was to ask policy informants about the opportunities and barriers they saw. So I'll start with that first objective. So I was talking about the tweet by Rabbi Matondo and the positive response to the tweet, and I decided to use a similar tweet and to go after those responses and to see whether I could learn something from their responses, and then use those responses as people to be a sample for the interviews. I'll just go over some of them quickly. So this one here, we've heard already about Colin Bay using the Welsh language, and someone saying here, great to see clubs using Welsh. The next one was in response to Rob McElhenney. Again, we've heard about him already. And just a word of thanks for making such an effort to use the Welsh language on social media, although it's not his first language. The next one again comes from a tweet by Rob McElhenney. This is even more powerful, I think, in terms of the fact that he's saying, I've been meaning to learn Welsh. This is the push I needed. That to me shows that there's huge potential in social media, in sport, to actually push people to learn Welsh. We talked about the word normalisation, and that's exactly the power that social media can have. The next one is in response to a tweet by the FAW when they retweeted Aaron Ramsey doing an interview in Welsh. And it's just a tweet thanking Aaron Ramsey for having the confidence to use the Welsh language. And it's a tweet by a Welsh learner just appreciating that someone who's had problems with their confidence using Welsh is now able to use it on social media so confidently. Again, Aaron Ramsey tweeting in Welsh at the bottom, and someone saying that Aaron Ramsey has so many followers, more or less the population of Wales, and one small tweet in Welsh every now and then can make such a difference, and it's so true. And this is what I was trying to see why this is true. I think this last one is very interesting in terms of some elements we've talked about this morning, because this tweet from FAW at the bottom, that is a penniad. What they're doing is just using one Welsh word for header, quite a simple word, but in a context where the word explains itself. I think at the bottom there was a video of Dan James's header for Wales, and Ellen Yall here saying that she always loves the fact that the FAW are using Welsh and English so organically and creatively, and that they're weaving Welsh words into English sayings, something she talked about in one of the conversations earlier. Lots of participants saying they don't like when sporting organisations just translate word for word from English to Welsh. They like it when things like that are just tied in together organically. So this was the kind of sample that came out of the study, and it was a case of going after these people from study A to try and understand further why they felt so strongly about this phenomenon. So I'll bring some up on the screen. I'll try and read them quite quickly. Yeah, so this is about the FAW. I see the power of sport to engage non-Welsh speakers, to kind of develop confidence or a positive feeling towards the Welsh language through sport. I think that sport has the power to do that. It says that the impact the Euros had in 2016. So yes, just saying about the power that sport can have to reflect how people see the Welsh language. Next, Wales is quite a small country. I'm sometimes surprised how many people I speak to on Twitter in Welsh, and you know them in a way then. If you go to places like the Eisteddfod or to a football match, you see them and they're familiar. Again, shows the power of social media in bringing people together. So maybe you meet someone in real life, something I called this virtual community that social media can create. And this was about the tweet I showed about Colin Bay. Someone saying that they just love seeing a little bit of Welsh. It's just the odd word. It just gives status to the language, normalizes the language. It just makes it look more attractive to people to speak it on a daily basis. This came from a girl working for Maldwyn Welsh Language Initiative, saying that seeing celebs using the Welsh language makes their work so much easier in promoting the Welsh language. Again, it's a reflection of the power that social media can have, but also the power that sports can have. Community initiatives work on a daily basis to try and promote the speaking of Welsh, but having one tweet from Aaron Ramsey can make such a world of difference. And yes, and this just says, not every single tweet has to be in Welsh, just that they make the effort. So one thing we discussed a lot with the participants was whether this should be something that's forced on organizations. And most said no, that would be kind of defeats the object. They just want to see that there's some kind of effort being made to use a little bit of Welsh. And the last one, this was in relation to the tweet by Ellen Yall about a little bit of code mixing, some slipping in some Welsh into English tweets, and I asked her whether this could be powerful for Welsh learners. And yes, he said that it just makes the Welsh language a little bit more accessible, rather than having to read a huge paragraph by a sporting organisation. They just see one word, they pick that word up, and they remember that word, and then it just adds to the awareness. So that's very briefly the first study. So then it made sense to take that forward and take it into study B, which was the evaluative assessment of sporting organisations in Wales. So I tried to focus on the football runs. There were some rugby ones too, and others as well. So we talked a little bit about Newport this morning. And Newport is quite a unique one, where Craig was talking about the club-led idea. So in Newport, a man called Dave Rogers decided to set up a Welsh Twitter called Yr Ystlyddion, because he thought that the club had a duty to tweet in Welsh. He's had support from the club to do this, and this was his reason for doing it. The Welsh language is growing in the Newport area. It's very important to create opportunities for people to use the language. Newport is a Welsh club with Welsh owners. The club is very keen to celebrate Wales. People in Newport have started to feel Welsh more than British now, so it's very important for the club to reflect this fact. So again, there's a fan or supporter who felt it's not right that a club in Wales is not using any Welsh on their social media accounts. We have to do something about it. We've heard already from Hugh at Wrexham. I interviewed Tom Barlow from Wrexham before Hugh started in post, when I noticed that Wrexham were using more and more Welsh on their social media accounts. And this is what he says.
Language, our fan base in Welsh, and that's going to be a huge proportion. Even if it was just 5%, just making those 5% of fans feel a bit more included. This is a Welsh club, they're using some Welsh, trying to use some Welsh, this is really good. So again, just feeling that they have that duty as a Welsh club to celebrate the identity and the language. And he told me, I asked him, since Rob and Ryan have come in, they directly told you have to use more Welsh? He said, no, they've never given us any kind of directive, that strict a directive, but if I see Rob and Ryan trying to use Welsh on programmes such as Henna or the news, why can't I reflect that on social media? This attitude, a positive attitude from top to bottom, that can have such an influence. And finally, of course, the FEW. So actually, I didn't speak to Ian Gwyn Hughes. I spoke with Rob Dowling, who is head of communication at the association. And Rob is not a Welsh speaker himself. He's come from a non-Welsh speaking family, but he's very proud of the Welsh language, and he's very proud of what the association is trying to do. So what he said was that they put the football on the side in a way. They try and represent in the country and themselves through the work that they do in other areas. And that they're trying to create an authentic community around the work that they're doing, and trying to make that a part of Welsh life, an important part of Welsh life, regardless of what's happening on the pitch. So almost that we're putting the results to the one side. Yes, they're important, but his role as head of communications, he wants to leave a bit more of a legacy and to emphasize the importance of the Welsh language. So again, that's very briefly study B. There were interviews with other supporting organisations, again some doing well, some not so well. And it's worth noting, we've heard a bit about Cardiff City Football Club already, so I would have loved to have an interview with Cardiff City and Swansea City, and I tried very hard to get interviews with them, but I failed. And I think that in itself is quite significant. They didn't want to take part in the interviews, probably because they had nothing good to say. But what we're seeing in these three examples here, at the top, the attitude is very positive, and it permeates down to the club, where at the top, someone like Cardiff City or Swansea City, they don't think that the owners have such a positive attitude towards the Welsh language or towards that identity as Welsh people. And then study C, the last study, I looked to interview different people at the top of the tree, if you like, these policy makers. So the Welsh Language Commissioner, the person from the Commission's office said how he had been in touch with people in Wrexham Football Club, and the partnership started with getting Wrexham to use more Welsh. Sport Wales. There are a couple of things, significant things from Sport Wales. The first one is just stating the power that sport can have, and that they acknowledge that. And the second one is a little bit, they're not as happy. They say they get a letter from the government every year, and this remit letter becomes increasingly about what they expect to see from Sport Wales. Yet again, the funding doesn't match that. So the government are almost saying we want more use of Welsh. They're not helping them to deliver that. And then finally, the Welsh Sports Association, I spoke about Andy Howard, he was the CEO of the WSA. Quite significant that he came from FAW, and he said if we're going to get 1 million Welsh speakers by 2050, we're going to have to use sport and leisure. And again, the message was we need more funding, we need more help. These organisations need more support to be able to do this. If that's whether that's language policy or support, translations, whatever is needed, they need more help. So again, very briefly, that was Study C. So very quickly, the main findings from the thesis. So we found that tweets by sporting entities have been found to have a positive impact on Welsh people, increasing their sense of belonging to the country, and that they're an effective way of normalising the language. There are some organisations who do a good job of using Welsh, some don't do such a good job. There's a sense that sports organisations have a duty to do this, but unfortunately there's a lack of resources which hampers many institutions, as well as linguistic uncertainty. It's not just a problem of lack of funding or lack of resources. Most of these people in the organisations don't come from a Welsh background, so they don't have the confidence to use the Welsh language because they feel that they're going to be ridiculed online. But there are many governing bodies who want to play a part and who can play a part, but at the moment there's a need for clearer partnership between these organisations. As we talked earlier about the Commissioner, Government, Sport Wales, WSA, they all have a really positive attitude towards the Welsh language and social media, but no one's working together. If an organisation needs help now, they don't really know where to go to get it. The Commissioner needs to help Wrexham, but there's no link between all organisations to be able to offer really effective support to organisations. So my recommendations from the doctorate is to kind of get over these barriers. It'd be good to be able to create a specific post or posts like an advisory post to create those partnerships between organisations at the top. There's one person kind of linking everyone together, asking for help from the Commissioner, help from Sport Wales, steering all of that. Additional funding. I'm sure that everyone's asking for more funding, but it doesn't have to be huge funding for all sporting organisations. Again, it can be one post, as I'm talking about at the top, to steer everything and drive it all, and to come up with a plan for organisations to improve their language policy. There are already plans out there, but there's nothing specific for the sporting world. And I think it's time to take the sporting world a little bit more seriously and give it parity of esteem, and to create a specific policy for them. Run a workshop for sporting organisations to be able to go over this plan and be able to create some kind of network that then continues for years to come. So yes, thanks for listening. I'm conscious of time and that you want food, so just 5 minutes. So hopefully there will be a question from the floor. If anyone wants to raise their hand, and I will come to you with the mic.
Do you see any difference, or have you come across any difference in perception of how people respond to tweets in Welsh when they're from an individual as opposed to an organisation, where if it appears that Bobby is doing that spontaneously and naturally, is that gaining more traction and more positive feedback maybe with less risk. I'd say the AVW or something would face unity. I think there's a little bit more appreciation, especially in terms of Ravi's background. He comes from a non-speaking Welsh family. I think there's more of an expectation for Welsh clubs to do it, and when an individual does it, especially when it's not his first language, I think there's a bit more appreciation that more effort has gone into it. Don't remember who Ravi was playing for at the time, but it would not have been the club pushing him to do that. It would have been off his own back that he wanted to do it. He was obviously very, and still is, very proud to be a Welsh speaker. I think there's a bit more appreciation for the individual and the club. I think, especially as time goes on, there'll be more expectation for the club to do it. As more clubs kind of start doing it, more clubs will follow, and it should, hopefully, it will become more normal. But yeah, a little bit more appreciation for an individual that especially comes from a non-speaking background.
Thanks very much. A question, because it's something that has struck me throughout the presentations today. You've done an analysis of Welsh language use online in Wales. To what extent is this use, in terms of typology maybe, to what extent is this symbolic? Does it show some relationship with the Welsh language and maybe with the audience? And how often is this for communication with the public, with users and fans? Because it strikes me a lot of the discussion today has been about how people talk about identity, not talking about languages for communication. Yes, I think it could work for both things, to be honest. I think the reason why people were responding so positively to the Welsh tweets was it was just something so uncommon to see, unusual to see. They were used to seeing tweets and organisations tweeting in Welsh. So I did a lot of work around virtual communities and online communities, and I think the social media and sport has become a kind of virtual community, a huge virtual community where people feel confident to communicate through the medium of Welsh, and also to show their appreciation, symbolic appreciation of the Welsh language being used. It's quite interesting, isn't it? We usually focus on negative responses that the Welsh language gets, and maybe not doing enough of drawing attention to positive responses, so I found that very beneficial. By the way, I'm director of the Welsh Language Community Initiatives in Wales, so obviously I'm interested in promoting the language in terms of status and people's attitudes towards the Welsh language. I'm thinking about the positive message, about the positive response that people provide. But out of interest, did you come across negative responses? Because you see a lot of those, don't you? Sometimes someone will put something up in Welsh and the response is, no, I didn't understand any of that. There is some group of people who feel the need to point out that they don't understand what's been tweeted in Welsh. So yes, was it more positive or negative? There was a lot more positive responses, but something that my supervisory team discussed a lot, whether I was going to go down the route of looking at negative responses as well. But what I found was the negative responses, it was usually from, say, Aaron Ramsey tweeted in Welsh, it would come from some Arsenal fan or not Welsh people. The negative responses were almost all from people I didn't want to hear from anyway. But they weren't going to help me with answering the problem because I wanted to speak to people who can speak Welsh. So there were far more positive responses, and almost I didn't see any negative response from someone who clearly came from Wales and was obviously someone who was aware of the language. The negative responses all came from people, trolls maybe I'd call them, who followed these people because they played for certain clubs in England and didn't understand that there isn't a language in Wales. Last question, I think. to support what Ian said now. Isn't there a danger that the Welsh language is restricted to identity and to symbolism? The banners are all in Welsh, but the chats are all in English. Daily things are in English. And why, therefore, the emphasis on Twitter, on X, at a time when everyone's coming off X? That's what the GMB News from X. It was negative responses. People are discussing on Facebook, and particularly new media, YouTube content in Welsh, and so on, digital content in Welsh as well. Yes, it's a good question. What I'll say is, you have to bear in mind, I started this work about 5 years ago, where I used Twitter because I just felt that it was quite a public medium. I was able to find these tweets without having to follow someone. On Facebook, I maybe would have to add someone as a friend. So there was an element of practicalities, just making it easier to research. But obviously now, with things as they are, what I want to do in the future is to research other media. And I was talking to Alan yesterday. We foresee that Twitter will be quite a volatile place for the next few years. So what I want to do is to try and set myself up with some kind of expert who can help clubs to look at the latest trends and tell them this is where you need to go, or this is where material should be put, and so on. So hopefully that will address that. Thank you very much to everyone for your questions, and thanks very much to Meilir for the presentation.